May the words of my mouth and the meditations of all of our hearts together find their way into the heart of God this morning. Amen. So, I lived in Boston for 17 years before I moved to Sterling, and I still miss a lot of things about Boston, to tell you the truth. But one thing I do not miss is the winter. It was cold there. Well, it's cold here too, Isaac, but there was something colder about it in Boston. For the first few years of city living, I didn't have a car. And right around the time I was engaged to my first husband in 2003, we purchased our first car together, which was about the same time that we moved to our first apartment in East Boston. We didn't have a driveway at our apartment, which meant that we had to park on the street. So for those of you, raise your hand if you've lived in Boston before. Okay, and raise your hand, that's a lot of you, not surprising. Raise your hand if you had a car in Boston. Okay, raise your hand if you had a driveway in Boston for your car. Okay, so some of you might know what this is like, but for those of you who don't know, when it snows in Boston, there is just no place to put the snow. So this results in towering snowbanks on the sides of the roads. The snowbanks get so high that school is sometimes canceled, not because the roads are still bad, but because it is unsafe for the kindergartners to wait for the bus teetering precariously on top of one of those snowbanks, right? In order to park your car, especially in neighborhoods outside of downtown, you have to shovel your car out of a parking space in the snowplow created snowbank your car was buried in overnight. And after you are done shoveling your car out, what do you have to do? You have to put a chair there, right? You have to, Aaron knows, you have to claim your space. And you have to claim it as your own. And you have to do this for the rest of the winter. There is no other choice. If you do not claim your parking space with a space saver, you will never be able to park near your home again until the snow melts in, April? If you've never seen this, raise your hand if you've never seen this, these space savers. All right, most of you have. But I encourage you to Google Boston space savers and see all of the creative things that people use to save their parking spaces. Beach chairs with life-size dolls lounging on them, barbecue grills, orange cones, buckets of rocks. Yesterday, I saw a picture of a sign on a sawhorse in a parking space in Southie that said, "Before you steal this spot, ask yourself, do I feel lucky? Abandon all hope, ye who enter this place." Both South Boston and East Boston are particularly famous for being ruthless about their snow space savers. Street justice with a vengeance comes into play in these two neighborhoods if the yuppies who are new to town dare break the neighborhood parking codes. Amen? Anyway, at the first significant snowfall in December of 2003, my first husband and I put on our full snow gear and dug out our car, which was parked a block from our apartment. Poor guys from Miami. We piled snow high up on either side of our car, creating a carved out space exactly the size of our Saturn sedan. Does anybody even own Saturns anymore? I called it our snow cubby. And we got an old kitchen chair from our house and gingerly placed it there. And every time we came home from work or the grocery store, we would move the chair out of the way and carefully parallel park around the snow walls we built on either side, which is a task unto itself. And the winter of 2003 was a particularly snowy one. In that bleak midwinter, snow kept falling, snow on snow, snow on snow. And our trusty chair continued to serve us well. Every morning when we left the space again, one of us would get out and put the chair back, and when it snowed again, we simply reshoveled our spot until the snow walls around it reached above our heads. And one day, one fateful day in late January, Mayor Menino, may he rest in peace, declared that he had had enough. You see, saving parking spaces on public city streets is actually illegal. Traditionally, city officials look the other way until it starts wreaking havoc on the populace, particularly people who are trying to visit the city neighborhoods and cannot find parking, right? So that January, the mayor declared that we had one day more, a grace period. And if we didn't move our space savers, the city of Boston would be coming around to throw our furniture and our ironing boards and carefully crafted signs away, and the whole city panicked. He can't do this, we said with fear and trembling. It will be anarchy. And Mayor Menino stayed true to his word. And the next day, I came home to my parking spot. And to my dismay, there was another car in it. So what does one do in this situation? I looked around and I saw that all of the space savers had been removed by the dump trucks that morning. So there were empty parking spots, and it was a parking free for all. I still had to put my car somewhere. So praying to all that is holy, I parked in my neighbor's shoveled out parking spot. It didn't have the changing table used to save the space in it anymore, but it was not my spot. Later that night, at around 10 p.m., I was in bed when I got a knock on my bedroom window. I went out onto the front stoop in my pajamas, and there was a man standing there. "Can I help you?" I said. "Did you park in someone else's shoveled out spot?" The man asked. "Who are you? How did you know it was me?" I said. "Boston Police." He held out a badge. "Did you park in someone else's shoveled out spot?" he asked again. "Yes," I said. "I had to. Someone was in my spot." The plainclothes officer shook his head and said, "Someone has smashed in all your windows and damaged your mirrors. Your car is not drivable because of all the glass, so you are gonna have to call a tow truck company and get it fixed." And I said, "Can't you do something about this? You're the police." And he replied, "How long you been in Eastie?" 6 months, I replied. He smiled and said, "Welcome to Eastie." And then he walked back to his car. That happened in Boston. Yeah. A fine welcome indeed. So I've been thinking about how saving space for the ghosts of First Church past can really negatively impact our ability to welcome and embrace those who are First Church's future. Humans use scarcity to view the world. Resources are finite, not plentiful. Parking spaces are scarce, so we better get and keep what's ours. Once we do the work to build what's ours, we think we need to claim and defend rather than share and invite. So our welcome to new neighborhoods, new people, new churches, new ways of being in the world suffers when we use fear-based scarcity lenses. But God consistently offers us a new way in which to see, new glasses God removes our space savers and then encourages us to share and invite. When we give up our miserly vigilance about what's ours, we have eyes to see that there is enough for all of us. So this brings us to our story from Luke. In it, Jesus meets up with a group of fishermen to teach them about this abundant grace that I'm talking about. He teaches them right on the boats where they work. First, he tells them to get out a little way from shore so that they can see a new perspective. And then he tells them to let down their nets to fish in the deep water. And Simon has no faith. We have been fishing all day, he says to Jesus. We have been coming up with nothing. There is clearly not enough fish. There's no point in doing this, but I guess if you say so, we'll try it. And when they let down the nets, they fill up with so much fish, the nets were breaking under the weight. And Simon Peter falls down to his knees and repents. I'm a sinner. I did not believe. He's so disgusted with himself that he tells Jesus, go away from me. Clearly, I'm not worthy of following you since I do not have faith. And the disciples weren't picked to follow Jesus because they were particularly holy or wise or faithful. In fact, he uses doubtful, disbelieving, demoralized, plain old working people to do God's love of justice, to do God's work of love and justice in the world. And I'd say that's why we all showed up here this morning too. We're not particularly wise or holy or special. Jesus sticks around. He doesn't go away from them. He says, do not be afraid. From now on, you will be catching people. And they follow him. They put down their nets and they follow him. So, polite mainline Protestants really don't like it when we talk about the Great Commission, otherwise known as evangelizing. We don't like that word, do we? That's why I titled this sermon, The Awkward Commission, instead of the Great Commission. We were taught that it was rude to talk about politics and religion in polite company, after all, right? Of course we find it weird to go out and fish for people to save souls for Jesus. It's definitely easier to call all the people who we haven't seen in a long time to come back to church than it is to invite a friend to join us in our mission to love the hell out of the world. So we've been focusing on the former and not the latter for good reason. But we need to stop fishing in the scarce waters of our past and let down our nets into the deep waters of our shared future together. When we are fearful and the future is uncertain, we cling to the past, but Jesus tells us, do not be afraid. From now on, you will be catching people. So maybe you haven't invited a friend to church lately. Understandable. It's a global pandemic. But what if I told you that part of evangelizing, the easiest part of all, is simply warmly welcoming and embracing those of us who are here today, both in person and online, right? Who yearn to know you and be known by you. Why don't you turn to the person next to you and just say hi? And say hi, say welcome. White Protestants love it when you do this. Yeah. We're glad you're here. Tell them, I'm glad you're here. Do it. Look at that. Look at that. A bunch of white Protestant evangelizers. I love it. Love it. We have all, including me, been far too focused on the missing congregants we had before the pandemic, so we've been casting back into those waters and coming up empty And we've been grieving all that has been lost rather than taking stock of all we have gained in these past 2 years. In our grief, we've been sort of holding space for their someday return. And we've been saying, like, let's wait. We'll wait to someday to fulfill our mission. When the vaccines come, or when the kids are vaccinated, or when the masks come off. We have gotten stuck in a holding pattern instead of moving forward. And our vigilant space saving does not contribute to a warm welcome to those who have stayed or those who have joined us. Oh, hi, everyone. Let me tell you about the people we wish were still sitting here but aren't, right? Don't move their barbecue grill out of the way because that's their pew. How long you been at First Church? Welcome to First Church, right? If we are so consumed with saving spaces and pews where our friends once were, we miss the chance to pick up our purses and make room for someone new to sit beside us, both here and on Facebook Live, where so many of us gather, right? There's plenty of room. There is plenty of room for all of us, our old friends and our new friends. There's plenty of room for who we were and who we are and who we will be. We can get so caught up in believing that resources are scarce, we fail to see the abundance already in front of us. We get so caught up in grieving what was that we have trouble celebrating what is, right? So, beloved, embrace the church we have now, not the one we lost. Introduce yourselves to someone new at coffee hour. Cast your net in the deep water and ask them why they came this morning. You may be surprised at how much depth just that question alone can access. Get out a little from the shore. If we look beyond the perceived limits of resources, knowledge, and energy, we can see that everything we need to thrive is already here. Already here. If you are new to us, please claim your spot. If you have been here forever, please give up yours and make room. None of this belongs to anyone but God. None of it. Embrace all hope, all ye who enter this place. God's grace is abundant, so there is always enough. There is enough joy for all of us. There is enough peace for all of us. There is enough hope for all of us. There is enough love for all of us. There is enough love for all of us. Amen? Our glory days are not behind us. They are here and now, alive with the Spirit of God, with these people in this room and in our extended congregation on Facebook Live and out in the community, that we will continue to love and serve no matter what happens, no matter what global pandemic or political discord happens. Until we have succeeded in God's mission to create heaven on earth, our glory days are always in front of us and not behind us. Do not be afraid. From now on, we will be catching people. Amen.